to trust that what their government tells them is the truth. Telling the truth is especially important when setting the serious precedent of invoking the Emergencies Act. We now know the Minister of Public Safety has been misleading Canadians. No police force asked for the act. He knows it. We all know it. There was no misunderstanding. The Minister has lost credibility and trust. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing and ask the Minister of Public Safety to step away from his duties?
The Honourable Minister.
When illegal blockades paralyzed our economy, hurt workers and communities, police, municipal and provincial leadership told us more tools were needed to bring them to an end. The former Ottawa police chief said at the time, "We cannot do it alone, and we're grateful for what they provided, but we need more." And even Alberta's Minister of Municipal Affairs wrote that the local RCMP, quote, "have exhausted all local and regional options. We listened, we determined that the Emergencies Act had the tools necessary to end this, and it worked."
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, there is no misunderstanding, and this is too important to try to skew the words. This is vitally important. No police officers or agencies asked for the act to be invoked. The Minister of Public Safety said that they did. He was not telling the truth. He misled Canadians. He cannot be trusted. He has lost the confidence of this House to do his job. Has he lost the confidence of the Prime Minister? Will the Prime Minister ask him to resign?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Let us be very clear, Mr. Speaker. Law enforcement should never be able to grant themselves extraordinary powers. That's up to government to choose to do, as we did with the Emergencies Act. But once in place, the Emergencies Act allowed police to, according to the Commissioner of the RCMP, refuse entry of individuals traveling to the illegal protest with the intent of participating. It gave police, quote, "the power to arrest individuals who continue to supply fuel, food, and other materials, and to compel individuals to provide essential towing services." Canadians remember how the
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has abdicated and failed in his responsibility to be truthful with Canadians. He is a lawyer and a former federal prosecutor. He knows full well how to choose his words carefully. He knows full well how to be precise in his language. Yet he said over and over again that law enforcement requested the Emergencies Act. Those were his words. We now know his words were not true. How can the Prime Minister have any faith in this minister? Will he ask this minister to resign?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what is crystal clear is how much the Conservative Party is hoping Canadians forget that they stood with the illegal blockaders, that they stood with the people disrupting the daily lives, the economy, the communities of Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Police services needed more tools to deal with these blockades, and that's why we stepped up to protect Canadians. We invoked the Emergencies Act, and it worked, Mr. Speaker, to end these illegal blockades and to keep Canadians safe.
Leader of
the Honourable Member for Mandate-Chino. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Public Safety has repeatedly said that the serious decision to invoke the Emergencies Act was made at the request of police authorities. All the police forces have denied that they asked for this emergency legislation. The Minister knows it, and as a former Crown Prosecutor, he also knows the importance of telling the truth and nothing but the truth. Since he cannot take back what he said, Mr. Speaker, and since a major civil liberties decision was made as a result, will he now do the honourable thing and resign? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we understand our responsibility for public safety, and that is exactly why we invoked the Emergency Measures Act. We sought advice from the police forces. We used their advice to inform our decision to invoke the act. And on the other side, I'd like to know why the Conservative Party has not apologized for their own role in extending the illegal blockades, which was extremely wrong. The Honourable Member for Mandate-Chino. Mr. Speaker, the Emergency Measures Act cannot be used when other laws would do the job just fine. The Minister of Public Safety knew this, and that is why he justified his decision by saying repeatedly that the police had asked for these increased powers. Not one police officer, police force, police chief, or commissioner has come forward to confirm the minister's words. There is no misunderstanding here. This Liberal minister no longer has the trust of Canadians. When will he come clean and resign? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the opposition is continuing to ignore the testimony of the RCMP Commissioner. She stated that the RCMP needed the Emergencies Act in order to restore public safety. The RCMP Commissioner said that, yes, the government consulted police forces before invoking the Act. The Conservatives, on the other hand, contributed to extending the illegal blockades. It is very wrong. They should apologize.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Public Safety continues to spread misinformation and can't be trusted. As a former Crown prosecutor, the Minister knows full well that his choice of words matters. He would have also known that when invoking the Emergencies Act in Canada, that everything he said would be tested against the law. However, the minister can't find anyone to corroborate his story that law enforcement asked for the Emergencies Act to be invoked. The only matter left unresolved is the minister's resignation. So when will he resign?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for highlighting my professional experience as a federal prosecutor before I came into politics. I got into politics to make sure that we could protect Canadians, and on this side of the House, we know what is necessary when it comes to the protection of the health and safety of Canadians. That's why we invoked the Emergencies Act. We obviously consulted police. We sought their advice. You heard the Commissioner say before the committee that we got that advice and we used it, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to know why it is, to this point in time today, the Conservatives refuse to apologize for their role in putting at danger the lives of the people who live in Ottawa and right across the country with their reckless statements.
The Honourable Member for Red Deer-Lacombe.
In 2015, the Prime Minister outlined his ministerial standards of conduct in his Open and Accountable Government document. And let me quote what it said. To be worthy of Canadians' trust, we must always act with integrity. This is not merely a matter of adopting the right rules or of ensuring technical compliance with those rules. As ministers, you and your staff must uphold the highest standards of honesty and impartiality. The Minister of Public Safety no longer meets any of those standards. When will he resign?
Mr. Speaker, I want to be unequivocally clear that we invoke the Emergencies Act amidst an unprecedented act of civil disobedience, in the words of the Canadian Association of the Chiefs of Police, who also said, I might add, that we invoked the Emergencies Act to fill in existing gaps as it related to existing authorities, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if that member would hold the same standard against the comments of the interim CPC leader who said in the middle of the blockades, let's make this the Prime Minister's problem. Let's make it a political problem. That was wrong. She knows it, and she should apologize.
The Honourable Member for Foothills.
What is wrong, Mr. Speaker, is the Liberals froze bank accounts, discarded our democracy, ignored our Charter of Rights, all predicated on a fabrication. Invoking the Emergencies Act was an unprecedented power grab, all based on misinformation. No police force ever asked for the Emergencies Act to be invoked. The fact is, the Public Safety Minister has been caught misleading Parliament and deceiving Canadians. Will he do the honourable thing? Will he do the right thing? Will he resign?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if that member had read the Emergencies Act, he would have seen that all of the measures that we introduced were charter compliant and were absolutely targeted towards an unprecedented act of civil disobedience, which the Conservatives continue to deny. And it is they who are engaging in revisionism, Mr. Speaker. It is they who engaged in reckless abandon, who, while Ottawa residents were unable to go to work, take their kids to childcare, were able to navigate the city, they were encouraging blockaders to double down. They put at risk the lives of the people in the city. It's wrong. They should apologize.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Here's the fact, Mr. Speaker. On April 28th, the Public Safety Minister said, "It is also a fact that we only invoke the emergencies after all police forces agreed." We don't believe him, Canadians don't believe him, and police forces don't believe him. They don't believe him because this never happened. No police force ever asked for the Emergency Act to be invoked. What has happened, and this is the fact, Mr. Speaker, is the Public Safety Minister has been caught misleading Canadians and misleading Parliament. No more talking points, no more skirting the blame. Will he do the right thing? Will he resign?
The honourable minister.
Talk about disinformation. Talk about a distortion of the record. You heard from the Commissioner of the RCMP who went before a committee and said that she needed to use the Emergencies Act to get the job done as quickly as possible. She spoke about the consultation between government and police forces to ensure that we use their advice to make that decision in an informed way, Mr. Speaker. And it is the Conservatives who continue to bury their heads in the sand in what was an unprecedented moment of civil disobedience. We worked with law enforcement to protect public safety. It was the Conservatives who undermined it.
L'honorable Innisfil.
On multiple occasions, the Minister of Public Safety said that police forces had requested the Emergencies Act. We now know that that wasn't true. Even worse, the minister doubled down on his false claims on multiple occasions in this House, in committee, and in the media. He even sent his deputy minister to committee to try to clean up his mess, saying he was misunderstood. There's no misunderstanding here. He knows exactly what he did. He misled Canadians, and he knows that there must be consequences. Mr. Speaker, will he do the honourable thing, the right thing, and announce his resignation today?
Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
I'm very happy to double down on the truth, which is on this side of the House. And the truth of the matter is that an unprecedented moment occurred last winter when we saw blockades at ports of entry. We saw people put out of work. We saw families hurt. We saw lives endangered. And we took the decision that was necessary, as informed by the consultation and advice that we got from police services, as you heard the Commissioner of the RCMP say at committee. I just don't understand why it is that to this moment, the Conservatives refuse to accept their egregious role in extending the danger that was put at public safety as a result of comments made during that unprecedented moment. They should apologize.
Member for Barrie Innisfil.
What's critical here, Mr. Speaker, is getting to the truth, because the truth is critical for the parliamentary committee investigating the invocation of the Act. The truth is also critical for the judicial inquiry charged with investigating the rationale of invoking the Act. What's known as the truth has been corrupted by the Minister of Public Safety. He knows his words matter. Making false claims, trying to justify invoking the Emergencies Act matters. It matters a lot. So will he do the right thing, the honourable thing, and resign?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the only honourable thing is for that member to look his interim Conservative Party leader of Canada and ask her to resile from the comments that she made during the illegal blockades, which put at risk public safety. It is an absolutely egregious thing to have done, Mr. Speaker. And on this side, we were working 24/7 with law enforcement to protect Canadians. It was the Conservatives who put their safety at risk. That was wrong, and they should apologize.
Well, member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Well, the minister talks about things being egregious and unprecedented, and what's unprecedented is the lengths that this minister will go to spread his disinformation and to continue to try and divide and stigmatize people that this government disagrees with. This is their pattern, to try and punish Canadians that disagree with them. On April 26th, he said it was the advice of law enforcement that he followed to invoke the Emergencies Act, but we know that's not true. We heard it directly from police. So will the minister come clean with Canadians, tell them that invoking emergency powers was actually a Liberal power grab, and resign today?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
It is astonishing to hear that member ask that question when I have repeatedly cited from law enforcement community leaders who said that they needed the Emergencies Act, that it helped to restore public safety, and that it helped to fill in existing gaps on authorities which were ineffective at restoring public safety, Mr. Speaker. And it is that member who should be looking right down the aisle at his interim Conservative Party leader who actually undermined public safety as a result of comments by trying to make it a political critical problem for the Prime Minister. That was fundamentally wrong. They are soft on crime, they are weak on law and order, and they should apologize.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Speaker, this minister's answers just aren't credible. If it was so unsafe, they continue to let all parliamentarians, all staff, continue to come into the precinct. Speaker, this minister has lost absolutely all credibility.
I'm going to have to interrupt the honourable member. I'm hearing shouting back and forth, and I'm having a hard time hearing the question. From the top, please.
Speaker, this minister has lost all credibility. He says it was so unsafe, but they continue to let all parliamentarians, ministers, the Prime Minister, residents of downtown Ottawa to continue to come down here. The risk that Canadians have is a minister and a cabinet that are spreading misinformation. We have a minister that refuses to take accountability and instead divides and stigmatizes Canadians, looking to pit neighbor against neighbor and government against Canadian if they don't agree with him. So will the minister do the honourable thing, stand before this House, deliver to this Prime Minister his resignation today?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, June 14th, and the Conservatives have still buried their heads in the sand about what is necessary to protect the health and safety of Canadians. That's why we invoked the Emergencies Act. We sought and consulted with the police forces before we took that decision, Mr. Speaker, and it is the Conservatives who undermine public safety. And to this moment, what they should do is they should take a mirror and they should take a hard look at themselves, at the way in which they contributed to the undermining of public safety. It was wrong, and there should be an apology today.
The honourable member for Timmins, James Bay.
For Charlebourg Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, Andrew Coyne of the Globe and Mail said, and I quote, "If the Liberals were trying to convince people that they had something to hide with regard to the decision to invoke the Federal Emergencies Act, they could hardly do a better job." The situation is serious. The Minister of Public Safety has misled Canadians and he must resign. Will he? Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we have nothing to hide. We're very proud of the work this government did during the illegal blockade. It was an unprecedented situation. And yes, when we were making that decision, we consulted, we spoke to law enforcement, but it was the Conservatives who created a threat to public safety with their rhetoric and the remarks of the interim leader. The honourable member for Charlebourg Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the same Andrew Coyne said, and I quote, "Well, there's a penalty for this sort of thing, and the penalty in the conventions of Westminster-style parliaments is resignation." He misled Canadians. Now, as with the story of Jody Wilson-Raybould, it's possible that she at least had principles, but the minister doesn't. When will the honourable resign? Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we did the work that was necessary during an unprecedented situation. We sought advice, we spoke to law enforcement before invoking the Emergencies Act, and it was the Conservatives who created a threat during this illegal blockade. They should look in the mirror and apologize for their remarks during the blockade. The honourable member for Bellechasse at Chemin-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, on April 26th, the Minister of Public Safety said this about emergency measures, and I quote, "I don't want to speak for all members of law enforcement, but there was a very strong consensus on the need to invoke the Act." End of quote. We now know that at no time was there such a consensus. He misled Canadians. He no longer deserves their trust. Will the minister do the honourable thing, apologize, and resign? The Honourable Minister. It's incredible that the members didn't listen to what the leaders of law enforcement said about the situation and about the decision to invoke the Act. It was the Association of the Canadian Chiefs of Police who said that the Emergencies Act was necessary to restore public safety. They were the ones who helped inform our decision during this process. And it's the Conservatives who should apologize for their role during the blockade. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse at Chemin-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, being a minister is a heavy responsibility. The minister said many times, quote, "It was only after we received the advice of law enforcement that we invoked the Emergencies Act," end of quote. Yet the law enforcement agencies he refers to never asked for these drastic measures. As Rex Murphy of the National Post said, "In the interest of integrity, the minister should resign." What's he waiting for?
Tout s'en vient très bien aujourd'hui.
Things are going well today, and I'd like that to continue, so I will let the Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Chemin-Lévis finish her question. My question is very simple, Mr. Speaker. He misled the House. He needs to apologize and resign. That's it.
L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister. No.
L'honorable député.
Speaker, the minister is desperate to blame someone else, but there is only one person that is under investigation, and that's the Minister of Public Safety. And the state of his credibility is grievous and irremediable. It is completely untenable to have a Minister of Public Safety who misleads the public about advice he is receiving from the police. Respectfully, so that his important office can be filled by someone that the public can trust, will the minister please resign?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to inform the colleague, as I have on many occasions, that we invoked the Emergencies Act because it was necessary. We invoked the Emergencies Act because on this side of the House, we know what it takes to protect the health and safety of Canadians. It's Conservatives who need to take a hard look in the mirror and really reflect on the way in which they put at risk public safety by trying to make it a political problem for the Prime Minister. We will never apologize, Mr. Speaker, for doing what we needed to do, which was invoke the Emergencies Act, yes, after consulting and yes, seeking the advice of police, as you heard the Commissioner of the RCMP say before committee.
Member for Calgary Midland-Port.
Mr. Speaker, there is only one person that is under investigation, and that is the Minister of Public Safety. The minister broke the law. The minister continues to mislead Canadians about why the government invoked the Emergencies Act. On May 2nd, he said, at the recommendation of police, we invoked the Emergencies Act to protect Canadians. We know now that it was never requested. So will the minister acknowledge that he deceived Canadians about his actions and resign from his position?
Honourable Minister.
Here we are again, and Canadians should pay very close attention to the language that is being used by Conservatives, saying that there's some investigation which does not exist. They know that. And I'll tell you something else. This is consistent with a pattern of behavior of reckless abandon when it comes to public safety. When it comes to the economy, perhaps Canadians should buy themselves out of affordability issues with cryptocurrency. How does that sound today? Not so great, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you something. We know what it takes to protect Canadians, and we will always do what's necessary. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Midland-Port.
Only one person that is under investigation, and that is...
Theater at the best.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Midland-Port from the top, please.
There is only one person that is under investigation, and that is the Minister of Public Safety. The minister broke the law. How can Canadians be expected to trust this minister when he continues to spread misinformation about the Emergencies Act? The minister said that invoking the Emergencies Act was on the recommendation of authorities, but it has been confirmed by law enforcement that it was not, in fact, true. So will the minister take accountability for his words and resign?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I know my colleague enjoys certain privileges in this House, which allows her to be rather reckless and loose with language. I invite her to say those words outside of this House. I scarcely think she would, because she knows it's not true, Mr. Speaker, and I invite the House to actually encourage her to retract those words. It debases the importance of this debate. We will always do what is necessary to protect the health and safety of Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de la Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, this minister continues to spread misinformation and cannot be trusted. Like me, the minister was a lawyer in his prior life. We both taught in a law school. I taught about the necessity of being honest. I trust he was honest with the courts. Being honest with Parliament is even more important. He repeatedly told this House law enforcement requested the Emergencies Act. They didn't. This misled Canadians. Will he resign?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, all we've heard today in the exhibit of the trial of who can tell the truth and who can't is the Conservatives who have deliberately continued to mislead on what has been said in this House on the state of affairs last winter when there was an unprecedented act of civil disobedience, on the fact that the government, yes, consulted police, yes, sought their advice prior to the invocation of the Emergencies Act, as you heard the RCMP, Mr. Speaker, say before the committee. That's what's gone on today, and they should be apologizing for their role in prolonging those blockades. It's wrong.
I just want to remind the Honourable Minister that in the House we can say someone is misleading someone. That's an accident. People do that. That's normal. But deliberately misleading is not acceptable language in the House. The Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson Caribou.
I'll expect the apology afterwards. How dare this minister wag his finger at me given his conduct in this House, Mr. Speaker. This minister needs to stop diverting, stop deflecting, and start divulging. He said law enforcement asked for the Emergencies Act. They didn't. He misled Canadians and put his own integrity into question. Will he offer his resignation today? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, I'm somewhat entertained by my honourable colleague who complains about wagging fingers and then proceeds to wag fingers to the government. He ought to live up to the high standards that he purports to set for us, which includes being very straight up with his interim Conservative Party of Canada leader who made recklessly abandonment statements during the blockade.
Question answer again. You can ask again, Speaker.
Ready? Order. Order. I just want to make sure everything's calm now. Now we want to hear the question from the Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, Speaker, let me update the minister. His use of the Emergencies Act is subject to a judicial inquiry and a parliamentary committee. The minister is misleading Canadians. The minister has been misleading Parliament. He is undermining Canadians' confidence in democracy and in our justice system. He has had all of question period. He has many months to finally come to the realization of what he's done. He's misled Canadians. He's misled Parliament. It's time to resign. Will the minister resign?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're very, very confident on this side of the House that the invocation of the Emergencies Act helped to restore public safety, helped to ensure that Canadians could get back to work, helped ensure that family members could take their kids to daycare, and ensured that we could restore public safety, Mr. Speaker. We will always, always defend that decision. We will never apologize for doing what is necessary, and it is the Conservatives who have some serious atoning to do after their performance today in question period.
The Honourable Member